All right, Tom, from Laura. We have I am new and started watching with deep interest your videos 1 month ago. I meditate every day with my husband since almost 2 years now. And during the month of December, I tried to remote view when I could not fall asleep by emptying my mind and focusing on the breath. I would notice really quickly that I was out of all of a sudden in a new place. And every time I would have a feeling of surprise or eureka, I was then kicked out and back to be awake. My questions to you are the following. Am I dreaming? It feels different from a dream. There are details and it lasts until I'm surprised by it. And then this happens, at least 10 times, being surprised by it and being thrown out. How can I stay a bit longer in the remote viewed place? And also, how can I remember what people um, looking like this entity tell me once I'm there? Thank you so much for having explored all this and for guiding us.
Okay, well, probably what you're doing could be more likely described as out of body rather than remote viewing, probably. But you know, we're splitting hairs to to name these things like that. And it really doesn't matter what's going on, but you're finding yourself in another reality frame, and you're interacting there until you get surprised, and then you come back. Well, just keep doing it. Eventually, you won't be surprised. You will have done it so many times that it'll be very difficult to surprise you. And you need to get to the point, this is to answer the question, how can you make it last longer? You need to get to the point where you're not surprised or shocked or frightened, where it just is. Matter of fact, you are, instead of surprised, you are, can I say, very positive about it. You're elated. You say, oh, okay, now I wonder what's going to happen next. This is interesting. What's going to happen next? Rather than, oh, wow, this is weird. What's going on here? You see that this is weird. What's going on here is the thing that brings you back. But if you just say, oh, I'm someplace else. Okay, where is this going to lead? And then you're just open for whatever. That will be an attitude that will help you stay there rather than come back. And you kind of have to pre-program your mind to have that reaction, and it will. Or you just keep doing it to where it happens so often and you've done it so many times that it just doesn't surprise you anymore, and then you won't have that reaction. So the way you can remember, your second question was, how do I remember the things that happen there and the conversations I have? Be aware of the interactions that you have and make an effort to remember them. The way you make an effort to remember them, if something particularly interesting, particularly insightful happens, then you need to repeat it in your mind. You need to think about it. What does that mean? What does that mean to me? And, in other words, process it a little bit. Don't just say, oh, that was neat. Now let's go on. But process it. How was it neat? And why was it neat? And if you think about it a little bit and say, well, that's really going to be something, I'd like to remember that. Well, then repeat it to yourself. Okay, what was that? Repeat it. And often you'll find that it takes you a little bit of time before you can repeat it in a point that actually captures everything that you want to capture. And that's good, because now while you're there, you'll sort out what it was that was so meaningful about that. You kind of distill it. And because you repeat it in your mind, it will stick. And you'll take it back with you. But if it's just a thing you experience, you go on to the next thing and go on to the next thing, then it's not going to stick very well. Just like your dreams. Your dreams don't stick because it's just like a series of images. You're not really so engaged. So engage with it, engage with the concept, engage with the idea, and you'll tend to remember it better. So I'd say that you're probably slipping out of body. You're probably slipping into some alternate reality, which means some other virtual reality. It's probably a single player game, and it's probably something that you should go, connect with, explore, see what's there, see where it leads. Fortunately, nobody comes out and tries to handcuff you. That at least you don't have that entree. But just explore it and see where it goes, and see what the lesson is. After you've had it, think about it. What did I learn from that? What choices did I make, and why did I make them?
All right, Tom, there's a follow-up question. How do we measure the reduction in entropy?
You measure the reduction in entropy by looking at your feelings. Your feelings are directly out of your being level. We never intellectually decide to feel something. Oh, I'm going to feel happy now. Oh, I think I'll feel angry now. The intellect doesn't come to conclusions and then have feelings. Feelings just leap right out of your inner core at your being level. So look at your feelings and look at them from just one, just judge them for just one thing, and that is, how positive are they? How negative are they? If you look at your feelings and your feelings are negative, you feel annoyed, you feel unappreciated, you feel, unloved, uncared for, unhappy, you feel, I don't know, unsatisfied. We can go on and on with all the uns, but they're not positive. The positive stuff is, I feel happy, I feel joy, I feel at peace, I feel calm, I feel serene, I feel lovely. Oh, it's wonderful to be alive, to be here now, to be me. That's positive. Oh, it sucks to be me, that's negative. So look at your feelings, and how do you feel about existence, yourself, life, everything that's going on. And if in general it's positive, well, your entropy is low. If it's in general negative, then your entropy is high. So that's the entropy meter. Just look at your own feelings that well up in you in a day or in a week. Just track them, whatever you're feeling. Maybe take a little pad with you and write it down, give a little description to every feeling you get and see what your feelings are dominantly. Dominantly positive, you're doing really well. Keep up the good work. Dominantly negative, well, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of fear and ego inside that you need to redress. So that's the gauge that'll tell you how you're doing.
All right, Tom, we have a question from Marla. Please go ahead.
These questions today have been really interesting, and a lot of them have touched on things that I'm looking at. But in this last experience where you were talking about getting into that mess, so to speak, I'm really curious about what the cycle of fear that morphs into hate that continues with Schadenfreude and feeling the emotions that need to be expressed through, people don't realize they're in fear. They express it, they jump right to anger and hate. So I would really like for you to sort of like drill down the whole cycle of that for us today, or me today.
Okay. Well, to begin with, any fear that you may have encourages more fear. It's like fear is a slippery slope. You become fearful, it's much easier to become more fearful. And of course, then you become more fearful, which makes it even easier to become even more fearful, and so on. So fear tends to be a slippery slope that consumes you. It's also true on the other side. If you feel very positive and you feel very happy about things, it's easier to become more positive. So whichever, I guess we could call that a slippery slope, but it's not a slope down, it's a slope up. So maybe it's a slippery ladder, or a ladder that's not slippery. I don't know, but what the metaphor would be there. But it works the same in both directions. The more you become any particular way, the easier it is to do that, to do more of that. You open up a pathway. So that's one thing. You may start with one fear, which leads to the next, which leads to the next, which, you can end up being paralyzed by fear at the bottom of that barrel. And often that's the way it starts with people. It starts with something small, and they get into that, and that leads them to the next thing, which leads them to the next thing. And it's just a long, slippery slope to where now all they do all day long is complain and then anger. That's their life. It kind of oscillates between complaining and shouting, complaining and being angry. And they don't know much else. Their life is kind of devolved into that. So typically that centers around a person not really liking themselves. That's kind of the core element that's at the middle of most of it. People who are insecure means they're not too secure with themselves. They're not all that happy with themselves. They have negative thoughts about themselves. They feel, I'm not really all that I pretend I am. I'm not all as I should be. Now, you can say something like that in a sense of growth. Well, I have a lot to grow up yet. I have a lot of things to grow up, and that can be very positive. But it can also be negative. Oh, I'm not very grown up. You see, there's a difference in attitude there. If it's a negative, if you really don't like yourself and don't find yourself to be very worthy, then it's real easy to find things that upset you and anger you. Because every time something happens that triggers that negativeness towards yourself, you take that negative feeling towards yourself and you push it back out, project it back out onto the rest of the world as negative stuff. You get angry at somebody. Okay, you're feeling insecure, you're feeling unworthy, and the person that makes you feel unworthy, you get angry at them. You see, for making you feel more unworthy. So that's kind of the mechanism that's going on. And for most people, it's a lack of confidence. It's a lack of self-esteem. It's a lack of, I'm okay. All right, I got a lot to learn, but I'm learning, and that's all right. I'm making the best choices I can. And sometimes I make poor choices and I learn from them, and that's all right. See, that's all positive. You don't need to be perfect to be positive. You just have to have a positive attitude that says, I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm trying, I'm doing the best I can, with what I've got to work with. And if you have that kind of an attitude, then you will be positive. But if you have this sense of being less than you should be, anything that triggers that, and almost anything can trigger that because you're looking for it. You're looking for it because you feel that way. You tend to interpret your reality to support that. So somebody says something, just any kind of a comment. Oh, gee, the sky is really blue today. And if you're positive, you go, oh yeah, it is. If you're negative, you'd say, blue, you don't think I know what color the sky is? You think I'm stupid?
Yeah.
You see, you immediately take everything personally as an insult because you feel not so good about yourself. So we tend to see the negative that upsets us, which tends to make us angry, really angry at ourselves, but we don't ever get angry at ourselves because that's just, we don't do that. Ego says no. blame it on somebody else. Yeah, of course I'm angry. Anybody with a brain would be angry. If you're not angry, there's something wrong with you. You see, I'm angry because of them and what they're doing. So you don't own your anger. You blame it on somebody else. Well, that's not the case. You're angry. It's your choice to be angry. You don't have to be angry. You just are angry. And you're angry because there's something inside of you that you feel is not the way it ought to be. You're not doing it right. You're not part of the solution. So typically the core, Marla, is not a good positive sense of self. Now, when I say a positive sense of self, I don't mean ego. That's another thing. That's like when you get angry at somebody that makes you feel bad about yourself. You're projecting that out. Well, the ego, another strategy for making yourself feel okay, besides blaming other people, is to then have your ego swell up and say, oh, I'm really a wonderful person. I'm terrific. I'm great. It's just everybody else is stupid and everybody else sucks and everybody else has this problem, but I don't. So that kind of an ego is another it's another way of dealing with feeling insecure and not good enough, is that you puff up and pretend to be better than everybody. And another way is you get angry at everyone. So these are just different strategies for dealing with having an awareness of not being all that you ought to be. So that's the basic thing that's happening there. So when you see people and they're angry or they complain all the time, they just, nothing comes out of their mouth other than, how things are bad and how things are awful and why things shouldn't be that way. And everything they say is really a complaint or a lamentation about how awful it is. They just don't seem to be able to say anything positive. It's because they really don't like themselves. They don't see much positive about themselves. And people who are angry and upset, it's the same thing. They feel angry because they need somebody else to blame. And mostly what they're trying to deal with is a lack of self-caring. They don't see themselves as a really a viable person that's growing up. So if you're not growing up and you say, well, I'm not very grown up, but how can I justify that? Oh, okay, I can justify that because you are keeping me down. I can justify that because I am a victim. I'm just too weak and too little and too small to really get anywhere. And all the big people that have all the power, they just step on us little people and I can't help it. I'm a victim. Or they can say, well, I'm better and smarter than everybody. Everybody's an idiot except me. So all of these are just strategies, different strategies for people to deal with their negative feelings toward themselves. So that's where it comes from. And then once it gets started, it just feeds on itself. Because the more you're negative, the worse you feel. The worse you feel, the more you have to justify it by blaming it on somebody else, which makes you feel worse. The more you have to justify it. And it just keeps going around that cycle to where you're just an angry person all the time. And when you're not being angry, you're being negative. You're complaining about things. So.
And the inoculation is your quote, just be a positive force in that mess.
Yes, just be a positive force in that mess. Okay, it is a mess. To tell people, oh, the world is just a lovely place and everybody is just full of love. Obviously, that's not true, but you can be a positive force in that mess. Yes, you can be. And let people be how they are. It's not our job to fix everybody else and to point out to everybody else what their problems are. Oh, I'll help save the world. I will tell everybody what their problems are. That will make the world a better place. That, of course, doesn't work either. So you have to just let people be who they are. Let them believe the things they believe. Let them, if what they're into is negative and being angry, well, there's not much you can do about that. But if you are a little point of positiveness, you'll actually take some of that anger and stuff away, because when they're around you, they won't have to be angry. They won't want to be angry. So you actually help them. You give them a hook. You give them something to hold on to, a little handhold in a positive place. So just by you being positive, you help other people be less negative. You help them be a little more positive too. And then when they're a little more positive, they help the people around them to be a little more positive. So it really is a powerful thing just to be positive with people, to embrace people however they are, but be positive with them. That is much more helpful to them than giving them a lecture on how they're always whining and sniveling and full of self-pity and they just need to grow up, damn it. You can tell them that, but it doesn't help. That just makes them more angry. Doesn't do them any good, but if you give them a hug and tell them to have a happy day, that may help just a little.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Tom, I want to clear up the quote here because your first quote was your first quote was be a positive influence in this mess. Is it be a positive influence or a positive force? It doesn't really matter.
Influence.
Okay.
Influence. We don't do anything by force. We
Okay,
just
I
influence.
just wanted to clear that one up. All right, just in case we have to quote it somewhere. There was a little bit of a follow-up to the last written question from Laurel, and that is by thinking that this plane of reality is defined by a set of rules, aren't we setting an intent which limits our possibilities?
Well, yes and no. It depends. This reality is defined by a set of rules. That's just the facts, and we have to deal with that. No matter how much we want to flap our arms and fly, it's just not likely we're going to get off the ground. You see, so there are some rules like that that you just have to live with. That's what we call our rule set. But now there's other rules, like these are the rules that define how our reality works. Now there's other rules that people make up, which are societal rules, cultural rules. Oh, you can't go there because you're not in that strata. You need to go get a job and wait tables or something because you can't go to college. You don't have any money. Only rich people go to college, and you're not that smart anyway. And people will tell you all kinds of negative things, but that's all wrong. You can say, no, I don't believe any of that. I'll work my way up, and you can. So there's lots of rules that people make in their cultures and in their societies and in their families that give you all kinds of prohibitions and things you can't do and things that are too hard and things that are impossible, which you should just ignore. You can do those things, right? That just limits you. That's fear limiting you. But there are some things that you just can't do. And one of them is flap your arms and fly. It's just not going to happen. So you have to know the difference between the two. You have to know the difference between the two. And if somebody's telling you you're not good enough, that's one of those rules that you should just ignore. That you're not able, that's one of those things you should just ignore. But if it's about the mechanics of how the reality works, well, those are things that just are. You have to live with those. That's the nature of our virtual reality. So there's some of both. There are some things that are fixed, but mostly the things that we run into, the limitations we run into are not fixed at all. They're habit, they're beliefs. And you can just ignore them and plow right on through if that's where your path is taking you. Don't be limited by those, but you do have to accept some limitations. You have to work with reality. It's like, let's take the old college thing. Let's say you're poor, but you'd like to, become an engineer or a brain surgeon or a lawyer or something, and you're really poor and can't afford to go to college or whatever. Well, there's ways around that. You can go to night school. You can go to community college and work up credits and scores. You can, it's not hard to get into a community college. All you have to do is show up for the most part. That's why community colleges are there, for people to get started. You can work your way up. Now you may have to have not the best job, but just one that can keep life and limb together while you do that, that gives you all your evenings off. And maybe that's not kind of what you'd like to do, but you can suck it up and do it, and you can make that path, and then you can get a scholarship, or you can work your way through college too. It just takes longer. So it may take you 10 years to do something that somebody else who's in a better position could do in 4 years. But if you want it, you can do it. And those years don't matter. If you spend an extra 6 years because you did 10 instead of 4, well, 20 years from now, that won't make any difference whatsoever. You see, that's just all good investment. So as long as you're making good investment in your future, well, then you can afford to not eat so well and live in a shabby place for a while, just because it enables you to get to where you want to go and be a student. You know, that's so there is opportunity for most people if they are willing to work hard enough to mine it. And sometimes it's hard. I mean, everybody doesn't have the same opportunities. Obviously, some people have an easier row to hoe. Some people, you know, it's going to take 10 years or 20 years to get to the same place somebody else gets more quickly. But, you know, fair is only a matter of ego. There's nothing that guarantees fairness to anyone. Instead of thinking that's not fair, that needs to change, it's not fair, it is the way it is. It may not be fair. And if you can help make things more fair, well, good, do that. But basically, you have to deal with the facts on the ground and find some way to get to where you want to be. And if there are obstacles, then you just start looking for ways over or around or through the obstacle. And most of the time, you can find ways, but you shouldn't be shut out of things. But it might not be easy, and it may take you a long time.
Would you say, Tom, that what you recommend, a meditation technique to explore the larger reality, would take you into a creative space that would allow you maybe more possibilities to come out of those restrictions that
Yeah,
we
that's
face?
one way. Yeah, that's one pathway. Meditation gives you a calm, serene space from which to work. And, you know, a lot of times we find out the things we really want, once we get there, we find out they really weren't what we wanted anyway. You know, you may find out that what you want is a full bank account. What I want is $1 million in the bank, and that's what I really want. And you get there and you have $1 million in the bank and you realize, oh, that's not really what I wanted. What I wanted was good relationships. What I wanted was a caring, you know, loving situation to be in. That's what I wanted. And you can't buy that. So oftentimes, yes, that meditation can put you in a space where you can differentiate between what you think you want and what you really want. That can be helpful in doing those kinds of things. And what we want changes as we grow up. You know, it changes a lot. But yeah, I would try to encourage everyone to, you know, don't be put off easily. Things that look like they're barriers generally are only barriers in belief. They're not barriers in reality. And if you do run into a barrier that is a hard reality for you, then deal with it positively. You may have to change your mind to do something else, but be positive about it. So you run into a barrier and you can't get through it and you can't find a way around it, well, then find a positive way to deal with it.
Thank you, Tom. We have a question from Arthur. Please go ahead.
Just a follow-up in meditation. So when it feels I'm in point consciousness, I feel an internal subtle sound, like an internal, real subtle sound. I'm just wondering what it could be.
Okay, you go into a meditation state and you hear a sound going on inside your head.
Yeah, it feels like an internal subtle sound. Yeah.
Yeah, that is something that you have created to kind of label that state. Very likely. It's probably not something that's outside of you that is impinging on you. It's probably internal to you, that when you get into that clear, calm state that's really effective, you know, you get into that good meditation space, then you'll hear this sound. And what I would do with that is just, that lets you know you're in a good meditation space. Just let that be a signpost for you. It's kind of your own signpost that you're there. And it's neat to have a signpost like that, because then you could be out walking around in the park and just kind of relaxed, and you hear that sound going on again. Well, you know that, okay, you're now in a good mental space for connecting with others, for connecting to yourself. And it becomes a thing that, you know, people have all kinds of signposts they make for themselves. Like they'll go into a meditation state and they feel like their arms are numb, like the things have fallen asleep, or they feel hot, or they feel tingles, or they feel, you know, a little, they feel the pulsation state, you know, where their body's wiggling around. There's all kinds of feelings and sounds, and sometimes even things that we see that we identify with a particular state. And I would say just use that as a signpost. It's a very handy thing to have, because you don't have to go sit down and get in a meditation state to be there. A lot of times you just get there in seconds.
Yeah,
and I'm sure
that's exactly what happens.
Yeah, I'm sure you have that experience. You're just standing, waiting for somebody to come by, and you start hearing that sound or something.
Yeah,
Lets you know
basically
you're in that state.
Yeah, whenever I want, I can like feel it, basically.
Yes. So see, now that's a tool you can use to get yourself in a meditation state. You don't have to use other tools. You've got already an association that you can put together very quickly, which means you can pop into that state and say, work on somebody's healing for, 30 seconds and pop right back out in a conversation. It's a good tool to have.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, we have one more question, and that's from Nadia.
Thank you. It was just an opportunity. I wasn't going to ask this, but since we're talking about types of experiences of meditation, I wanted to ask about, because I use binaural beats. I've been using them for the past year, I would say. And so that's intentional versus something that I experience by accident, usually when I nap in the afternoon, it's not at night. And I want to just ask you about the difference in the accidental meditative state. It's very, very lucid. It's like as if my eyes are open and I can see everything. And also it's very, very, the focus is very effortless. So the whole experience is easy. So in terms of if I want to inquire something, or, the consciousness is very clear. There's a lot of clarity. Mm-hmm. Now, with binaural beats, it's a little bit muted, let's say. So the screen is, let's say, black. And when I try to do, let's say, for example, remote viewing, it's very, very partial and fragmented. So it's a bit more, it's harder to be in that state. It's not as clear, and it's harder to remember afterwards when I come out of it. I have to write everything down to remember. And I just wanted to ask, the difference there is, of course, the accidental version, I don't know how to initiate it consciously. Hence, I was very curious about the binaural beats and to try them out to see whether they could help me enter that place. But it seems like it's not getting me there. And I wanted to ask you what you think about this.
Okay. Well, the state that you'd most like to be in would be the one that you do accidentally. What you need to do is learn to be able to do it on purpose and not just accidentally. How often do these accidents happen? Is it very rare or pretty common?
It's relatively rare. However, lately I've been intentionally going for a nap in the afternoon, and I feel that I can enter the pre-state of a state. Like I feel it's so close, but I can't seem to get through to it yet. Maybe I'm not supposed to yet. I don't know. Maybe there's a block.
No, the problem there and the block, yeah, there is a little block there, is because you're trying. You see, when it's accidental, you're not trying. It just happens. You're just there and you let go, you're relaxed, you open up, and there it is. And that's the way it should always work. When you try, oh, I'm going to put on binaural beats and now get into a good state, just the effort of trying, of focusing on doing it, is the thing that keeps you from doing it. It's, so when you try, then the trying keeps you from getting there. So you're almost there and you're almost there and you're trying, but you can't quite get there. If you just relax and open and say, it'll be whatever it is, let it be whatever it is, you will find more success with that. But you'll have the problem of trying to keep that intellect to sit down and be quiet. So the intellect doesn't still just keep trying, even though you've decided just to relax and let go. So that would be one thing, is try not to try. Try real hard not to try at all. Yeah.
The hard one.
Yeah. The other thing is that doing it naturally is always going to be better than doing it with binaural beats. I mean, the binaural beats will get you close. It'll put you in a similar state, but it's, again, you're putting on the binaural beats because of what it is you want them to do for you. Again, you're doing it on purpose to get to a particular place. You're trying, and it's that same trying that's getting in the way there. So that's kind of the same problem, except the beats kind of lock you into this theta state and hold you there. And that's like more like using a sledgehammer to crack a peanut. It holds you there, and naturally, you're not really just in that theta state. You're kind of in a lot more complex state naturally. So the binaural beat will get you close. And if you're not very good at meditating, the binaural beat will get you a lot closer than you will get on your own. But if you are good and you can do it naturally, you should try to develop that. And that will be superior to the binaural beat, if you can just do that. But the thing to do is say, well, okay, maybe it'll happen and maybe it won't. I'll just let it happen. It'll happen or not, and I'm okay either way. And you do that, and then you just lie back and relax and just let go and see what happens. With that attitude, it'll start happening more and more often. And eventually you'll get the sense that's all I have to do. All I have to do is relax and let go, and it'll just happen by itself. And then it will. So I'd say practice that, work with that. Still use your binaural beats, because that's giving you some part of it. But when you're using your binaural beats, try to add clarity to it. If it feels kind of fuzzy and it's not quite as clear, just force clarity. Like, wake up. Say, I'm gonna wake up. Be clear here. Still have the binaural beats going on, but just kind of push clarity into your mind, and not worry about, well, is that going to get me out of the state? Don't worry about that. Just be clear. And you can probably clear those binaural beats up, because they don't have to be fuzzy either.
I see. Well, with the binaural beats, something happens. There's a lot of noise. And then let's say 5 minutes in, everything just goes quiet. And I feel like I enter this vacuum, and it's like a nut, like I get pushed into it. But still being in it is not very consistent. I can't maintain it too long. In comparison to the other one, it's very, very stable. Like it doesn't go away no matter what, until later on.
Well, yeah, I'd say just keep practicing, keep doing it. Things will change, and for you, they will get better. The change isn't going to be a negative change. It'll be a positive change. Be open to it, and continue to experiment, and just be patient. It takes It takes a while. The more patient you can be and the more relaxed and open you can be, then the more quickly it'll come along. The more you try to push on it, the less success you'll have.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Go ahead, Nathan.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone. I've really enjoyed just listening and like received a lot from people's questions and your answers, Tom. So feeling super, super grateful. This is a selfish thing I'll do real quick before my question. And it's because I want more friends at the Advanced Explorer program with me. So I just want to put a little plug here. It's such a privilege, Tom, to have opportunity to ask you questions and have experiences and get your coaching. So I hope people come to the Advanced Explorer program. And that's in mid-March here, actually just in a week or two. Yeah. So Keith put the link in the chat there. And I know Bev will be there and some others here. So I'm excited to be with those who are going. I do have a question. It's interesting because like that last answer you gave, Tom, was really great. It's almost like the metaphor I'm coming up with is like like I go up to a telephone booth and like I'm trying so hard. I'm like trying to find the number to dial when really it's just I just need to pick up the phone and just be listening and like what wants to come to me through the phone rather than me trying to get out there and do something. Because I've tried to do the binaural beats recently, and I'm like trying to get in point consciousness, and I can still feel my hands, and I have this like intellect, and it's all this kind of funny and trying and intentionality. And I just loved the answer you gave to the last question, which is like, stop trying, it's almost like we make ourselves available and we just have the intent, but just the surrender to it is something that I'm appreciating. And I wonder if you could speak to that as well as a brief experience I had where I was like, well, maybe I'll just practice like visualization. And so I started just seeing like a red apple in detail. And then I was really starting to see it and the visual was good. And then I just got kicked out and I heard like something like, that's enough for today or something like that. So that might have been something just specific for me for the system, but also I just know I can unknowingly just generate stuff. So I'm just wondering how that metaphor of like the phone as well as the apple, if you could speak to those.
Well, yeah, the metaphor with the phone is basically a metaphor of trying too hard, and trying too hard is one of the bigger mistakes that people make. The harder you try, the more difficult it is to succeed, because this is not a thing you do, it's a thing you be. It's in the intellectual side of us, you do things, you make analysis, you figure things out, you come to conclusions, you do that. And that's what we're used to doing. On the intuitive side, if you try to push the intuitive side to some conclusion or something, it just wads up. It's pushing on a string. There's nothing there to push. It doesn't work. So what you have to do on the intuitive side is just open up and be. Let the connection's there. Your consciousness, the connection's already there. You don't have to make a connection. All you have to do is open up to it. And that turns out for most people who are, live out of their intellect most of the time, that's not such an easy thing to do. But that's really all that's required. So the more you chase after, say, an out of body, oh, I really want to have an out of body. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm taking these courses. I've tried all these techniques. The harder you chase it, the more difficult it gets. It's something that has to work through your intuitive space, not through your intellectual space. You can't push through your intuitive space. You can't, intellectualize in your intuitive space. You can't make your intuitive space happen. You have to let it happen. So yes, just pick up the phone and listen. It's not a matter about doing it. But the problem with us when we do that is our intellectual side says, well, if all you do is walk in a phone booth and pick up the phone and listen, you're never going to hear anything, dummy. First, you got to call someone, or someone needs to call you. If all you do is listen, nothing's going to happen. And your intellect starts telling you stories like that. So you believe it and you go to start trying harder, to do it. But that's the problem. People's intellects are used to solving problems by doing. making things happen. And in this realm, the realm of the intuitive, the realm of the being level, you just have to be and let things happen. It's just opening up is the key. Letting the contact develop. You've got the contact. It's part of you. Everybody has that part. Your consciousness, that's what you are. It's there. You just have to let it flow. And as soon as it starts flowing, that intellect jumps in and says, "What? Did you just make that up? Where'd that come from?" Your intellect's always kibitzing, which is why you were told there was enough, enough for today with your apple. There was some part of you. Okay, so you visualize and you see an apple. Well, practice visualizing is a good thing. It exercises a part, of your consciousness. It exercises even a part of your brain. And it's a good thing, but there's some part of you that says, well, this is kind of interesting and I'm really getting a lot of details, but am I wasting time? I mean, is this just a fruitless thing to do? And when that little negative thing slips into the side of your mind that maybe you're just wasting time or maybe this is not fruitful, that's the thing that then turns into the voice that says, that's enough. That's enough for today. Go do something useful now. So it's your own, it is a fear, but it's a very small fear, but it's a fear of wasting time, a fear of doing something that isn't really profitable. A fear of, now you're out in woo-woo space and that's not really, going to pay off. So there's something there and it tells you to just stop. So it wasn't the system thought that you'd seen enough apples or that, that was enough practice in visualizing or anything like that. That was coming out of your own, questioning of putting the resources and the time into what it was that you're doing it. So that's what makes the intuitive side difficult, is that we have to unlearn the doing with the intellect. And that is so ingrained because that's our life. Here in this virtual reality, that's what we do. We use our intellect to do stuff, to access stuff. If we don't assess and analyze, well, we'd be like gibbering idiots. That's what makes us better than dogs and cats, right? Is that we can our intellect is sharper, works better, can do more things. So that's what we think. That intellect is kind of the prize and it runs our life. And then we get over to the intuitive side and it still wants to run our life. And it just takes time. You just have to be patient to let that intuitive side develop. If you'd started developing it when you were 3 years old and then got better at it by the time you were 5 and got really good at it by the time you were 10 or 12, well, it'd be a different world. But you didn't. By the time you got to be 6 or 7, they told you to stop dreaming, get back to work. And you give up that intuitive side altogether. And if you're a scientist, you probably even deny that it even exists. It's an hallucination, so no wonder that it's so hard for us to go back and get that, because we are so out of balance. It just takes a lot of time to develop it up. It just needs patience and just let it happen, which is difficult. I mean, it sounds like the easiest thing to do in the world, right? Just lay back and let it happen. What could be easier than that? But because of the way we have our intellect trained, that is a very hard thing to do. But it will work in time, and visualizing is a good thing to do. Somebody tells you that's enough, stop visualizing, just tell them to go sit down and be quiet for a while, you're busy.
So can't eat too many apples in one day from the system's point.
No, take that apple and turn that apple around and zoom in on the little defects that are on the, and zoom into the structure of the skin and see, the molecular structure in there, go into the inside, look at the seeds, then come back out and see the stem and look at all that little fuzzy stuff that's on the stem, and go in there and sit down on one of those little pieces of fuzz. And yeah, you can just, that apple can be entertaining for a long time if you really get into that apple. And all of that helps you develop, your non-intellectual side. It helps you develop your intuitive side.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't expecting this morning to wake up feeling inspired to talk to Tom and talk about apples, and now I'm ready to like hop in my meditation space and do apples. So it just speaks to like the unpredictability of the reality win and how it's fun. It's just we're playing. So thank you. It's been actually surprisingly inspiring.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Tom. And thank you, everyone, for these great questions and this delightful session. Thanks again for all of your support.
Can you unmute us so we can say thank you?
Please.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have a lot of old friends here. I see Costa and Zelkus, Costa Zelkus, I mean. And over there, he didn't say anything, but he's here. Nambetta, yeah, seen you in France, right? Long time. Yeah, I see there's lots of old friends here. Don. Yeah.
Eric hasn't spoken yet. We haven't heard from you, Eric.
Eric's growing a mustache. That mustache maybe makes his lip a little heavy, harder to speak.
I saved my questions for tomorrow, so never celebrate too early, I guess.
That's right. Tomorrow's a fireside chat.
What a good way to make us come to the fireside chat. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you,
Thank
everyone.
you, Donna.
Thank
Thank you,
guys.
Donna.
Thank you,
Donna.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this user-friendly, ad-free YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to do what we can. It's our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our newly created Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you.